Tahoe Tessie. So you've heard of the Loch Ness Monster, the monster coming out of the Loch Ness, what is it, a lake, I guess? Lake Loch Ness?
Yeah, the Loch Ness Monster,
In Scotland, is it, or Wales, wherever it is. You've heard of the Loch Ness Monster. Mm-hmm. This Tahoe Tessie is Lake Tahoe's version. Now, you might say, well, did they just copy this story from the Loch Ness area? I mean, it's a very similar story. It is a big body of water, and there's a creature very similar in features coming out of this lake. But it's a completely different story. Now, There are several sightings of this, and you wrote a great article on ActiveNorCal.com, and you kind of bullet point where that kind of started. Now, it did start in... it was tribal in origin. There were some tribal stories from the local tribes about seeing this creature in the lake. Okay, so it kind of started there, but then the actual written historical sightings, we'll call it, started in the 1950s. Two off-duty police officers, claimed to see a large black hump emerge from the water and kept speeding by their boat, which was going 60 miles an hour. So that was the first one. Next one, again in 1950s. Two divers reported finding an underwater cave, and a creature shot out of that cave, leaving silt and stirred about in the water, so they weren't able to see. But when they went back, there were two really large fin prints that were indented. So that was kind of the second, we'll call it, sighting. Next one, sometime in the late 1990s, so about 40 years later, a kayaking instructor reported seeing a glimpse of what looked like a green two-person kayak flipped over and then just immediately sank. So he went up and approached the area in his boat, and there were no traces of a kayak anywhere. It literally disappeared, and so that was... In his opinion, that was a sighting. He then, the fact that he saw this kayak-looking thing and it disappeared faster than an actual kayak would sink made him personally believe that that's what he saw. So that was the next sighting. Next sighting in 2004, an off-duty bartender. I love how it says that. An off-duty bartender. I'm an off-duty bartender. On the Tahoe Queen, took a picture of a black hump in the water, which he claims is the top of the creature's head. And the last sighting that I have listed here, in 2006, a family vacationing near Tahoe sighted a large, black, scaly-looking creature similar in appearance to a sturgeon with an upturned white nose. However, the creature moved up and down like a mammal instead of side to side like a reptile. So, Tahoe Tessie.
It makes sense that there'd be a giant creature sitting so deep down there, right? Like, it's such a deep lake that we really don't know what's going on down there, and so it makes sense. Now, it's easy to just blow this off as just like these different, it's just like the Loch Ness Monster. You believe it or not, there's a lot of fabricated photos out there which kind of ruin it, but
because they're so bad.
Because they're bad.
Right.
They're legit bad.
So, put some effort in. If you're going to doctor something up, put some effort in.
I have looked so far and wide for pictures of Tahoe Tessie online, and they're all terrible.
Yeah.
But
it's comical how bad they are.
There are, there were stories in the San Francisco Examiner with multiple legit people. Like, there was a politician, there were police officers, there were 10 employees of the Tahoe City Post Office. They all saw this thing. So that's what brings credence to it, right? Not only that, but the Native Americans they knew of something going on in there, right? And they were there for thousands of years. So, maybe this was some sort of ancient, whatever being that has just been down there for a long time, and maybe it's going extinct or whatever. But Tahoe's 3.5 million years old. So it makes sense there's some sort of crazy creature that's evolved down there.
There's a SF Gate article that I read, and they talk about how, they brought an expert in because they're like, well, could this potentially be a dinosaur? It's a really deep lake. Could like dinosaurs have existed? And the guy was quickly reminded, well, dinosaurs were extinct 65 million years ago.
Yeah.
So like this would kind of be the only one, and you can't really have a species continue with having only one, And so I would love to believe this, but again, it's legend.
So they also researchers from UC Davis said someone could have put sturgeon in there, right? They said and because it's so big and sturgeon grow to be
30 feet,
1,000 pounds, that it could have been a sturgeon. Someone could have people just bring fish to lakes like randomly, it's so funny. I was up in Fall River Mills last week, and some guy told me how he planted a bunch of fish in Hat Creek. I'm like, you're an asshole. Anyway,
it's weird.
But I mean, a lot of people examine this. A lot of actual researchers from colleges have done a lot of research on this, and it's also become sort of a fun story surrounding the lake. They have a lot of marketing.
Like they need anymore, if I'm honest.
True, but it's fun for the kids. There was this kids book, I think in the 80s, that it sold 10 million copies. So it's a fun little kid story that you can go to a store in Tahoe. You can see the lake. You can buy your kid a little doll, a Tahoe Tessie doll.
Come to Lake Tahoe, see the dead bodies and the monsters at the bottom of the lake.
Yeah, but this is once again the Costo quote. You guys don't know what's down there, and it's okay, well, tell us please, because we would really like to know. But yeah, it's a lot of people just think it's probably this sturgeon that someone put into the lake, and it just grew to massive proportions, like we see on Shasta Lake. And Shasta Lake's not even close to the depth of Lake Tahoe, which sturgeon sit at the bottom and eat for over 100 years.
I wonder what it would look like to see that area, like Lake Tahoe, empty, just to see what the landscape at the bottom looks like. That's fascinating to me. It's so deep, and it feels like it's not big enough to be that deep. And so it's just this big sinkhole looking thing. And for me, it just is fascinating.
Well, it's not a perfect circle, but you can see from one side to the other. That's why it's cool. But it's also, so when I think of Lake Tahoe, I don't think of this massive lake like Shasta Lake, where, it could take you 30 minutes to drive from one side to the other. It's huge. Although I guess it takes you an hour to drive around Lake Tahoe. But you could see from one side to the other, so it doesn't seem that big. But it is big, and it's just super deep. It's a super unique lake, especially considering it's, these natural lakes just aren't found very often in California. Most of them are from dams.
Well, and it started as a hole, right? And this water accumulates in this hole. So where'd the hole come from?
Oh, there's a million legends about that. How there's a hidden creek at the bottom of the lake, and there's all this stuff. But it's fascinating, and not to get too far into this, but there's literally filters on both sides of the lake, both in it and out of it, that make it so clear. The marshes on the sides of Lake Tahoe just make it super clear.
Natural filters.
It's just a super unique lake, and I do think when you're if you actually believe that there's some sort of creature in there, it does make sense that someone put a sturgeon in there. It grew to 2,000 pounds. And
that's totally feasible.
Yeah,
1,000%.
And there were all these sightings in the 80s, and then it died. Right? Totally. And then it died, and it was the only one in there, and we know it can't spawn or anything, so it just sits there and grows fat and happy until it dies.
My favorite fact about sturgeon is that that's where caviar comes from.
Yeah,
as I've mentioned on this podcast.
We could have talked about sturgeon in Lake Shasta, but it's not a legend.
Didn't make top 10.
It's not a legend.
Didn't make top 10.
It's not a legend, Bob. It is factual. It is fact.
You have we have pictures of massive, but is there a 30-foot one? Because that's what the legend is. 30-foot sturgeon.
I've never seen a picture of it. No, there's
a big one, but I don't know if it's 30 feet.
The Shasta Dam Museum has a picture of a monstrous one caught in the 70s, which is crazy because the longer they last, the bigger they get, right? Like they're
Of
just
course.
getting faster
Right,
and
right.
fatter and fatter. So, but no, a 600-pounder was caught there last summer. I'm sure we'll see another one this summer. And they were just locked when they built the dam. They were locked there, and now they just grow fat until they die. So, super unique. But